Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, and alongside of me, or across the state, Xavier McKnight. Good evening, X-Man.
Good evening, Scott. I hope everything is well over there on the eastern coast of Florida. Things are quiet here on the west coast right now. We hope everybody's ready for the hot, spicy entrees that we are dishing out in our kitchen here tonight on The Real and the Rare.
Yeah, well, I'm heading up with my wife to northern Florida, where the Detroit Lions will take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This meeting happens in northern Florida once every 8 years, and they play each other. The next time the Lions will see the Jaguars will be in 4 years over at Ford Field. So meanwhile, I have an opportunity to cover an NFL game. I have a great working relationship with the folks up in Jacksonville, some of the classiest people out there, most notably Dan Edwards, who I've known for a long, long time. So looking forward to going up there, and at least for this game, and hopefully maybe another game or two at the end of the year. Not holding my breath, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to cover an NFL game this weekend. We'll play it by ear, depending on all the ongoing developments. But before we go into the what we're talking about tonight, the NBA, why don't you make an announcement here for our fans?
Yes, so we will be moving The Real and the Rare to every Thursday night, once a week now, ladies and gentlemen. You will be hearing a lot more of us now going forward. We are no longer a bi-weekly podcast or a bi-weekly show here. We are moving to once a week, and we are moving our content to Thursdays as opposed to it being on Fridays.
Right, we feel it's a good opportunity to stretch this broadcast out. There's no shortage of material. And with the X-Man, we want to make sure that we not only provide just sports, but we provide a lot of news. And you're in a business, Xavier, where you're involved with the news, working at a television station. So I don't think there's any doubt in my mind there will be no shortage of content whatsoever.
No, not at all.
So folks, get ready. The Real and the Rare is once a week with the Motor City Madmouth and the X-Man. All right. With that said, let's tip off this broadcast, Xavier McKnight.
Well, first of all, congratulations are in order to the new NBA World Champion, Los Angeles Lakers.
Where'd you get that hat?
See that right there, but we have a Lakers hat right here in honor of the Los Angeles Lakers winning their 17th NBA World Championship. This now ties them with the Boston Celtics for the most NBA championships in NBA history. And I've heard a lot of things this week on how they won this in a bubble. They avoided the Clippers. There's an asterisk by this championship. It really doesn't count. No. All of the teams and all of the players agreed to go down to the bubble, and they agreed to play to those rules. Had anybody else won, we wouldn't be hearing all of this right now. Once again, this is about people's hatred, I should say, towards LeBron James in some form or fashion. Enough of that. This is not an asterisk. This is a real NBA championship, and you have to give the Lakers their credit. They can't control the fact that the Los Angeles Clippers didn't get the job done against the Denver Nuggets in the second round. The Lakers played everybody who was in front of them and give LeBron James and Anthony Davis and company their props. They showed up to play night in and night out. They stayed focused when other players and other teams had trouble focusing while in the bubble, and they got the job done, and they came back home with the Larry O'Brien trophy.
First of all, where'd you get that Lakers hat?
Well, 2 years ago, when I was just shopping at home at a Ross thrift store, I'm a Lakers fan, so I saw this Lakers hat, and I just decided to get that for myself as a present for myself during that time.
Good for you.
And it's just something that I just keep right here on the side every once in a while.
Well, let me tell you what. I don't care what anybody says in my neck of the woods. I was pulling for the Lakers to beat the Miami Heat. I have no use for the Miami Heat. I don't. And more importantly, I got to tell you, earlier in the year when I was over in L.A. at the Southern California Sports Broadcasters lunch, I had a picture with Bill McDonald, one of the announcers for the Lakers, and I actually had an opportunity to go ahead and take a picture with Stu Lance as well. So my cousin Terry Kroll, who died way too early many years ago, was a big Lakers fan, and I also worked with the Lakers a little bit from time to time when I covered games, whether I was with the Pistons or whatever I was doing. Or I actually saw a Lakers and Heat game many years ago when Glenn Rice was playing over at the Forum in Inglewood. So, you know, I've had a pretty good working relationship with the Lakers. They used to have a guy named John Black who went out there and ran the PR, and he never questioned my credentials whatsoever. He was very cooperative when I needed him. So for me, I was pulling for the Lakers. I was pulling for him hard. And of course, I will kid you that Magic Johnson's always been a favorite of mine as well. So.
And Scott, honestly, I really don't see how anybody can have an issue with the Lakers winning the championship this year in particular. Organization's been through a lot this year. Most notably, as we all know, at the start of this year, things got off to a horrible start on the last Sunday in January, where we all received some news that Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 other beautiful souls had passed away in a helicopter crash.
Right.
It was only right for the Los Angeles Lakers to bring that title home this year when you honestly think about it. So once again, for everybody who did not see, congratulations to the newly crowned world champion, Los Angeles Lakers. Congratulations to LeBron James on winning his 4th NBA championship and his 4th NBA Finals MVP. Congratulations to Dwight Howard on winning his first NBA championship 16 years into the league. And he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer for those out there who, for some reason, have doubts about that. It's like many people, they forget the history of Dwight Howard and how a decade ago, he was the most dominant big man in the game of basketball down in Orlando, defending his 3rd consecutive year of being the Defensive Player of the Year. And he had finished in the top 3 of MVP voting in that season as well, just 10 years ago. So he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Another first ballot Hall of Famer will be now 2-time NBA champion Rajon Rondo, who, Rondo had some really good years with the Boston Celtics. Injuries have really derailed his career, but playoff Rondo is a real thing, Scott. He is a totally different player when he gets in the postseason as opposed to how he's played much during the regular season. And of course, congratulations to Anthony Davis on his first NBA championship. We can only guess that he is only scratching the surface of what will be a incredible prestige career for him as well. And congratulations to all of the other members of the Lakers and that organization as well. And a huge congratulations to Lakers principal owner Jeannie Buss on becoming the first female owner in NBA history to win an NBA championship.
Well, we may differ on this one. I don't view Dwight Howard as a Hall of Famer. I don't. Okay. The guy, he's been, granted, he had a pretty good start to his career, but in the last 5 or 6 years, moved around all over the planet doesn't constitute me as being a Hall of Famer. He belongs there's a Hall of Fame and then the Hall of the Very Good. And I believe, in my opinion, Dwight Howard belongs in the Hall of Very Good. Rajon Rondo, I might make a case for him because of what he did with Boston. It was a very dominant team. He was a very big part of that team. But no, we differ there. And of course, Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka, nobody thought he could pull this thing off, and he did a pretty good job. And what about Frank Vogel getting the Rodney Dangerfield? I don't get any respect. Well, he's got a ring now, and I have a feeling he'll be getting a hefty pay raise as well.
Yes, I owe him a huge congratulations, and I owe him a huge apology as well. I have come on this platform, the Sports Exchange, and many of our other platforms here on this network, and I've said that I felt that he was a low-rent coach that was hired by the Lakers out of desperation. They waited too long to make a coaching hire. I was absolutely wrong about Frank Vogel. He did everything that he was supposed to do while down in the bubble throughout the course of the season, and especially throughout this postseason. He made the adjustments when they were supposed to be made. Even when the Lakers took a loss in the postseason, it was only one loss per series in the first 3 series. They lost 2 games to the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. But every loss they took down in the bubble, he made adjustments and he made sure that team was ready to play every single night. So kudos to head coach Frank Vogel on winning an NBA championship. And isn't it just ironic, Scott, that LeBron James and Anthony Davis took the same coach that got fired in Indiana under the watch of Paul George, one of those 2 stars on that other team in LA who failed to show up when it counted the most, and went and won a championship with him.
Anybody that in their right mind that puts an asterisk next to the LA Lakers, they have brain damage. There is no way in any way, shape, or form that this title deserves an asterisk. Period. No way. To be in a bubble locked in there for 4 months with an NBA season that lasted a better part of a year with all the delays and the distractions, plus some of the social injustice issues. Now, again, I didn't really care for the social justice platform being, played up as much as it did. Nothing against it per se. You go to the bubble to play basketball is what you do, and I understand the platform. It's just a personal opinion, whether it's the right opinion or not. And then, of course, to the NBA's credit, Adam Silver, they let him use it for a platform, so there's no conflict. But what the Lakers did, basketball-wise, to me, there is no way I would even dare to put an asterisk next to that accomplish. It's not their fault that the LA Clippers have never been to a conference finals, okay? It's not their fault that they would subsequently make a coaching change, okay, that Doc Rivers didn't get the job done. Although I think, and I know we'll talk about it in a little while, that Ty Lue might have a puncher's chance to do it. The Lakers earned their way there. Again, they put Rob Pelinka did a good job assembling some pieces here to work around the James Anthony Davis tandem, and they all fit in very well. But without Frank Vogel, organizing their minutes and doing what he had to do, they're not winning a title. But LeBron James, to me, is he the greatest of all time? No. Is he the greatest maybe of this particular generation? I guess you can make a case for it now. Having 4 rings versus 3 certainly does help his legacy a bit. But I'm not going to go as far as saying that he belongs on Mount Rushmore of NBA players because of the other players that have been here before him. But to his credit, he was able to win a championship with 3 different organizations with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which to me was the biggest one he'll ever have since they never had one. The Miami Heat had a title before he got there. And of course, the Lakers had 16 before he ended up getting there. I think you made an interesting point about Kobe Bryant, though. That team did go through an awful lot with that tragic death. It really is. And they played hard for him. They rallied around him, and it was a tough year. Then again, 2020 has been rough for everybody. So.
And I'd also like to now take this time, because you brought up the 3 teams that LeBron James has won NBA championships with. I'd like to take the time to congratulate one of those teams who fell short in the NBA Finals, and that would be the Miami Heat.
Right.
They fought very hard. They were shorthanded for most of that series due to injuries to Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic, but they fought hard. Jimmy Butler really just brought the heart of a champion almost every single night outside of Game 6, where I just think at that point he didn't have anything left, because in Game 5 he played in all but about 47 seconds of that game. So he didn't really have much to give anymore in Game 6. Bam Adebayo, he fought back from those injuries that he had with that strained neck and that shoulder, but he never was quite the same. He couldn't even handle the ball the same way. And God bless Goran Dragic, who really tried to come out and play hard in Game 6, but that torn foot that he had with that plantar fascia injury, it just wasn't going to let him be the Goran Dragic that we knew that he could be. Eric Spoelstra is a great coach in this game. There was just one thing that he should have continued to stick to that he did not for some reason down the stretch. He insisted on playing more of Jay Crowder than Kelly Olynyk, and Kelly Olynyk was really presenting the Lakers with some problems. And I thought if he had stuck with that, maybe they could have given the Lakers a little more harder of a time. Don't get me wrong, I believe the Lakers were going to win this championship anyway, and I believe that they were going to win it in 6 games. But I don't believe it would have necessarily happened in the blowout fashion that it did in Game 6. But, congratulations to the Miami Heat organization on a successful season, even though they're not going to view it that way because they didn't bring home the NBA championship.
Well, you got to remember a few things. Number one, you know what Jimmy Butler really did, don't you? He made idiots out of the Chicago Bulls. He made bigger idiots, out of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he made bigger idiots out of the Philadelphia 76ers, who should have kept him instead of Tobias Harris. And Brett Brown lost his job because he couldn't get it figured out. So Jimmy Butler, to me, has a heart of a lion. I don't know about you. I know you probably played basketball, but 1 against 5 is really not a fair matchup.
It's really not. And in that Game 5 was absolutely incredible. Him and LeBron James literally going blow for blow down the stretch, and Jimmy finding a way to pull that game out. And one of the reasons Jimmy Butler is one of my favorite players to watch is one day after losing in the NBA Finals, instead of taking a flight to go on vacation, Jimmy Butler was right back in the gym, pounding and grinding and working away on getting ready for the next season. That's how you do it. That's how it's done. That's how you come back a better player. That right there.
Well, Jimmy Butler reminds me of Rambo. He tried to do it all by himself. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. Don't get me wrong about what I said about, the protests over in the bubble. I have nothing against protests whatsoever. I've given you enough airtime on here to express my feelings that Black Lives Matter, and I'll never change my position that they really do. I believe, though, that when you do a job, okay, your focus when you go in that environment is you really need to just grind it out and play basketball and last as long as you can. And unfortunately, the NBA has drawn a lot of criticism because of the fact that they've been so vocal to a point where it almost overshadows the basketball. So I'm not trying to turn this into a lightning rod of a conversation, but when, it's like anything else, that's what your objective is. So I want to make sure that I set the record straight on this broadcast, that it's very clear that while I think that they deserve every platform they can to make their case, the problems that they're making their case for weren't going to get solved with a few simple protests, knowing that your problems date back to the several hundred years. They weren't going to solve it in just a few weeks' time. They were not going to do it. Yes, will they be heard? I get that. But now I just want to make sure that that point's completely understood. Now, talk about Jimmy Butler. When the biggest wild card in it is Pat Riley, okay? He respects Pat Riley as though he's a father figure. And the only guy that could reach Jimmy Butler, who I think is the most misunderstood basketball player on the planet, is Pat Riley, because he's a hard-nosed guy. He lets him be himself. Anytime you can let somebody be themselves, okay, that's the kind of person you want to be. I'm not trying to change this kid. I love his intensity, the heart of a lion this guy has. Jimmy Butler is one of those type of players who could play in any era. Any. He could have played in the Bad Boys era, would have fit in beautifully, back when they were hitting each other and smacking each other all over the court. But name me too many players in this era right now that could have really played back in the 80s.
There's only a handful, and he's definitely a part of that handful.
So give me the other four.
I'm going to say Giannis Antetokounmpo could have played in that era because of how muscular and how masculine and how physical he can be.
Okay.
I'm going to say that Draymond Green, because of the physicality he brings to the game, could have played in that era.
Okay.
And then I'm going to say Chris Paul could have played in that era as well. Just how dominant he is as a point guard and how physical he is and how he brings that defense first mentality, which is what that era was about. And because of his play style and because of how dominant he has been and because of the physical nature that he has to himself, LeBron James. And that's where I'm pretty much going to stop the list right there.
Well, that's good. That's a good list. You got Giannis, you got Draymond Green, Chris Paul, and then you have LeBron, and of course I put in there Jimmy Butler. That's a good list. It really is. Chris Paul could have easily played in it because he's a pure natural point guard in every sense of the word, and he reminds me a lot of Isaiah Thomas, just a natural point guard. Draymond Green reminds me of Dennis Rodman. Rebound, defense. LeBron James, I think he could have easily have played in that era. Jimmy Butler, without a doubt. And Giannis, he's a freak athlete, is what he is. So I think that's an excellent group of five. So let's go ahead and talk about some other NBA news.
Yes, first let's get into the Los Angeles Clippers, that other team in LA. And I'll be referring to them as that other team in LA until they absolutely redeem themselves from the disappointment that they had in the NBA public. They hired Tyronn Lue as their head coach yesterday, signed a 5-year deal. This isn't something they necessarily wanted to do because if it was, they would have got this deal done a lot quicker than they did. But I believe they saw that the Houston Rockets were serious about wanting to hire Tyronn Lue as the head coach, and they knew then they had to make a move. I'm actually shocked that he ended up getting this job, though, Scott. And the reason I say that is not because of him necessarily as a coach, but just the fact that I expected the Clippers organization to handle this in a similar way that they handled free agency last year, to do something quiet and to do something a little unexpected. I expected there to be a name that they were going to bring in that we didn't even hear about, that was under the radar, and that was closely being monitored by Jerry West and others within the organization. And that's not what ended up happening. They ended up making an internal hire. Not that there's necessarily something wrong with that. That's just not what I expected to see them do. But clearly, there weren't many candidates out there on that side that I was thinking about for them to make the move the way that they made it, unless, of course, hiring Tyronn Lue may have been some sort of knee-jerk reaction. But because of the amount of time that Doc Rivers has been let go compared to now, I'm not going to say that that was a knee-jerk reaction.
Right. Neither
Long and hard about that process, and they feel that he is the man going forward. And the one thing that he has going for himself, besides the fact that he is an NBA championship winning head coach, he did coach a superstar, two superstars, as a matter of fact, Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, and a third all-star there in Kevin Love. So he knows how to manage egos, and he knows how to do all of those things, which is going to be very important, because just hours after he was hired, there were reports that came out from The Athletic that many of the Clippers players were unhappy and resentful about the preferential treatment that was being given towards one Kawhi Leonard.
Wow, big deal. You know what? First of all, they knew when Kawhi Leonard went there to play ball, okay, that he had load management with the Toronto Raptors, who handled that situation brilliantly. And the guy that was even brilliant than the brilliantly is Nick Nurse. The guy plays 62 games, plays his best basketball in the postseason. And guess what? The Toronto Raptors, who have been in the league a heck of a lot less than the LA Clippers or whatever, San Diego Clippers or Buffalo Braves, whatever you want to call them, I could care less, okay? Win a championship far sooner than the Clippers have ever been. And Nick Nurse, the load management, they knew what they were getting into. So anybody that's going to whine about preferential treatment, get over it. I don't even want to hear it. Really.
Well, see, part of the issue here is the fact that even though the Clippers had a tight wound, what appeared to be ball of yarn last season before Kawhi Leonard and Paul George showed up, with Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell and other players who were no longer on the team, who were traded to get Paul George to the Clippers, Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, players like that. They didn't really have a leader out of that group. And if they did, maybe it was one of those two players that ended up in Oklahoma City. I don't believe that was the case. They didn't have a leader, but they did have a way of where it was like, we show up, we play hard, we practice hard, we give everything we got. And you have to say that about them, because they took a healthy Golden State Warriors team and pushed them to 6 games in the first round of the 2019 playoffs. This is with Kevin Durant healthy. Now, even though they didn't win the series, it says a lot for a team that a lot of people, myself included, was projecting they're going to get swept off the floor. And they're going to be lucky if they don't lose every single game by at least 25 points. No, they pushed them to 6 games. And it very well could have easily went to 7. But that says something. And, of course, when you bring in a guy who is going to be allowed to load manage, but when you start hearing things as well about how he was giving games off throughout the course of that load management and was allowed to go back home to San Diego, and sometimes that would lead to him being late to team flights, I can see where that would cause a bit of an issue. But it's also the fact that you have to understand that that's a superstar. That's a two-time NBA champion coming off of an NBA championship.
Time out. Okay. Time out. From what I read on this whole thing, okay, the guy lives in San Diego, not the worst place on the planet, late to team flights. Who cares, okay? Jerry West knew what he was getting into. Jerry West is a very, very smart basketball guy, and he knows he's an impact player. And Jerry West, in the worst way, wants to go out there and beat the Lakers. And at some point, maybe he's the Scotty Bowman, okay, of the NBA that could pull it off. So don't get me wrong, okay? If Kawhi Leonard chooses to live in San Diego, which is a beautiful place anyway. You ever been there? Great place.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, well, go there, go to La Jolla, and then I'm not worried about the 2 hour. Think about Phillip Rivers when they moved to L.A., the Chargers moved there. He stayed in San Diego to get away from all that. You know, you take that 2-hour drive or whatever, just to veg a little bit, you get back home. Who the heck cares? You know, to me. So all this whining that the Clippers do, just keep your mouth shut. Focus on playing the game of basketball to your best of your ability and quit whining. Because I don't know about you, pal. Okay, whining to me never gets it done. Nobody really cares. You know, they're one of just a few teams that hasn't been to the NBA Finals. That means that you've had a lot of teams. What do you got? Maybe 4 or 5, 6 teams that haven't been there. I don't even know off the top of my head, but not that many. Okay, and the Clippers are one of them. They have mismanaged that organization so bad that they're trying to find a way to make excuses. So I don't want to hear it. Really, I mean, you know what? You had an opportunity. I would think the being in the bubble should have helped them out. They didn't have to worry about traveling all over the place. Who cares? Everybody knew where they were going every single day to play ball. One in the bubble, pretty well set up. You know, so to me, I don't buy it as far as the Clippers are concerned. You knew what you were getting with Kawhi. Okay, keep your mouth shut and play basketball.
And that says a lot because we already know that many of the Clippers players didn't want to go down to the bubble anyway. That was part of the problem here to begin with in the first place. A lot of them didn't want to go down to the bubble for various reasons, whether it was COVID-19 concerns, whether it was concerns about social injustice and continuing to fight and protest out in the streets. And I understand all of that. But they had a lot of other issues even before going down to the bubble anyway. Their team chemistry was never where exactly it was supposed to be. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault because Paul George was injured throughout the first half of the season. So you didn't really get to see a lot of Paul George and Kawhi on the floor with the other players that they have before play was suspended due to the pandemic happening. I do believe, though, that around March, they may have had a chance to really get that chemistry going. It looked like they were heading in the right direction. But would that have been enough for come playoff time? I don't know, because that other team in LA, the now world champion Lakers, they were rolling as well. So, you know, we can only guess on what would have happened had it been a normal NBA season. But yes, I'm with you. Those guys need to keep their mouth shut and they need to just focus on playing basketball. And the Clippers, I really believe they're going to have to make some moves anyway. They're going to have to clean up that locker room with some of those personalities that they have in there.
Right. Yeah, but not wanting to go to the bubble, then they should have stayed home. I'm sure other teams would more than happy have stayed in that bubble instead of them. So too bad. You know, you were good enough to make the playoffs. I'm sure the San Antonio Spurs would have liked to have kept their playoff streak intact. Didn't do it. They didn't, you know, but big deal. You didn't want to go to the bubble. That's the circumstances they were dealt with. Doc Rivers, you know why he probably left? He was sick and tired probably of the drama with all these clowns in there is what he probably had seen enough. You know what? You know, he to me is one of the better coaches out. I don't care about his postseason record, about how many decisive games. So what? In the end, he still has a championship ring to show for it. One of the better basketball minds out of Marquette University. He had some success. I do really have to admit, though, that I do believe the Tyronn Lue hire was a good hire for them. I really do. Because of what you just said, okay? He can manage the egos and was in a situation in Cleveland where he was forced to do exactly that. You follow me? So, yeah, I don't think it was an injury. I think it was the most logical choice.
And you brought up Doc Rivers there, and I'll just bring up this point by saying even more. It's not the first time that he had been with that organization that he had to deal with silliness and dysfunction as well. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, the stories are out there. They couldn't get along with each other. And that was one of the more talented teams. You can argue that on paper, that was more talented than what this Clippers team was, and they couldn't even get to a Western Conference Finals either. So, yeah, he had pretty much seen enough with the organization, and now he goes to Philadelphia, who they have a history when it comes down to their organization of being able to win and win championships, even though that hasn't happened for almost 40 years now.
Right.
Maybe he can go there and change the culture and get those guys to playing the way that they should be playing. And it also helps that he was able to add a former head coach, really good head coach in the league too, by the way, Dave Yeager, to his coaching staff yesterday.
Right.
So he is beginning to build that staff up. But it says a lot to me that Dave Yeager took that job as opposed to taking the Pacers job. I don't know if he was actually offered that job or not, but he was a candidate for that position, Scott.
Right.
And I don't know if on the Pacers' part, this is because Mike D'Antoni has all but agreed to that job and the details just haven't come out yet, or the coaching candidates out there know this team's going to undergo a rebuilding mode.
Well,
And I
that's
say
true.
that because Victor Oladipo, the rumors are out there that he doesn't want to be there anymore, even though he came out and shut those down. The rumors out there that Miles Turner doesn't want to be there anymore. He came out and shut those down. I believe that stuff is true about them actually wanting to be there as opposed to not being there when we get to the next NBA season and if they're on the Indiana Pacers roster.
Well,
If I had to take a guess at it right now, I'm going to say that they won't be.
yeah, I don't know if in Indiana whether or not these guys really know what they want. So how do you expect the coaching situation? Are you going to be a rebuild or are you going to retool? I mean, there's a difference between the two. But to me, I'm sick and tired of NBA players. I don't want to be here. You know what? Again, we're going back into the whining category. Okay, you guys are getting paid an awful lot of money to play basketball. Something we would all like to do if we were talented enough to do it. Again, keep your mouth shut, play basketball, and you'll make a good living doing it. So again, the Pacers' job isn't the worst job on the planet. Larry Bird won there. So did Rick Carlisle. Larry Brown won there. Indiana, you ever been to Indiana before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what, they're rabid basketball fans out there. They really are. I remember going there many years ago at the old Market Square Arena and saw Indiana, I believe, take on Orlando for the Eastern Conference Finals. I was there during the Indianapolis 500. Had a good time there. So, and I've covered Pacers games over at the Market Square Arena and actually visited the Hoosier Gym. Eventually, I want to go back there when the weather's better, but that's a great basketball market. It really is. So anybody that doesn't want to go there, big deal. Okay. The grass is really greener. They're a really solid franchise. There's nothing wrong with the Pacers.
Also, another candidate who was up for that job, he is no longer going to be going for that job either. And that is because he has accepted the job as the lead assistant coach on Tyronn Lue's staff with the Clippers. And that would be former NBA champion and Detroit Pistons great Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, I heard.
And I believe that is a very good move on the part of Tyronn Lue and the Clippers to add that type of championship pedigree to that coaching staff.
Well, Billups, I hear, was the announcing for a year anyhow. And I think Chauncey probably should sit on a bench, get used to the grind, and he doesn't have to rush into a job. Okay, he really doesn't need to rush. Just pay your dues, go a couple of years. If you're good enough anyways, the team does well. Top assistants usually get rewarded at some point or another. So, and again, everybody has to realize that Chauncey Billups, when he was traded away from the Pistons or Allen Iverson, the Pistons organization was never the same again, unfortunately. But so he does have leadership qualities on the floor, but the question is now he has to develop a coaching resume worthy enough to give him an opportunity. Chauncey Billups, if he wants to coach in this league, he will. But he stepped it back. I was glad to see Alvin Gentry land in New Orleans, or rather Sacramento, as well. All these guys that have great records, great basketball minds, always stay in the game, whether they're a lead assist or not. These guys are like, to me, the equivalent of a bench coach for Major League Baseball. You can never have enough great minds at your disposal, for sure.
Yes, I agree. As a matter of fact, that's a huge addition for the Sacramento Kings, organization that is trying to figure out how they can at least get back to some postseason winning ways. They've never won a championship since they've been out in that city, but they're trying to figure out how they can at least get themselves back in the postseason. And I also feel that that's a big loss for the Philadelphia 76ers because he was rumored to be one of the lead assistants heading over to Doc Rivers' staff. But it doesn't hurt when you have Dave Yeager as a replacement either.
Well, again, I don't get too wrapped up in a lot of the coaching moves because they are what they are. You don't know. I mean, I know that the Houston Rockets are talking about bringing John Lucas, 66 years old. He's back as a possibility, and I think they're talking about Jeff Van Gundy. If I had to make a choice between the hires, to be honest with you, I'd go with Jeff Van Gundy. He's won there before. He's not a flashy type of coach. He believes in old-fashioned defense and all that. But the only issue you have down in Houston is you have the small ball approach, which I still don't, to me, is the equivalent to the run and shoot offense in football or the wildcat. I don't buy it. I don't think you can win with it. I think it's a gimmick is what I really think it is. But anybody that takes that job either has to acclimate toward, or the new general manager that takes Daryl Morey's place. Well, I think they made the hire who the new general manager is.
And I'm glad you brought that up because we are going to segue into it now. The Houston Rockets do have a new general manager, Raphael Stone, who had been one of the lead assistants in that front office under Daryl Morey for many years now. It's kind of a surprise to me, to be honest with you, because I did not think that the owner of the team, Tillman Fertitta, wanted to continue to go in an analytics-driven type of way, and that is exactly what Raphael Stone is going to do. But the main thing is that they get some bigs back on that team. And after what the Lakers did to them in the second round and how the Lakers went on to win an NBA championship with all that size that they had, they will be getting some bigs back on that team. There is no doubt about that. Wow. And if Jeff Van Gundy is hired as the coach, there is no doubt in my mind that there will be some real NBA centers and big men on that team.
You ever hear of Patrick Ewing?
Yes.
I think he was pretty good, wasn't he? Okay.
He was, and so was another big man who unfortunately had injury troubles. But while he was in Houston as the head coach, Jeff Van Gundy, the first time he was there, assuming that there will be a second time, I do believe there will be. But the first time he was there, he coached another pretty good big man as well. He goes by the name of Yao Ming. Injuries just hurt his career in a lot of ways. But when he was healthy and out on the floor, he could present some problems as well.
Oh, yeah. Again, what they did with that small ball thing, to me, was absurd. In this league, this isn't Hoosiers, okay, the movie Hoosiers, where you have all these little guys from Hickory going against guys who are very much oversized compared to these guys. This is the NBA. It gets physical. Talk to me, okay? I'll tell you what physical basketball is when we talk about the bad boys, okay? You probably needed mouth guards back then. They didn't have them, but you could have used them. And I know Isaiah Thomas could have when Karl Malone and him had his battles out in Utah, and Isaiah took a beating with those elbows, but that's for another show. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. But I think Jeff Van Gundy would be a great hire if they're smart enough to proceed with that hire. I think Jeff wouldn't mind. I think he lives in Houston anyway, so he calls it his adopted hometown. So we'll see.
He does, and it should be noted that he was one of the lead candidates for the Clippers job. That's honestly who I thought the Clippers were going to end up hiring. But whether he ends up in Houston or possibly could still end up somewhere else, someone's going to get another great basketball mind with Jeff Van Gundy. You just listen to the way that he breaks down the game when he's broadcasting the playoffs and the NBA broadcast. It's almost similar to when John Gruden was on Monday Night Football and the way he would sit there and he would break down those broadcasts. You knew deep down inside, this guy belongs on someone's sideline. And we saw it happen with John Gruden, even though it took a little time. I believe we're going to see it happen with Jeff Van Gundy as well.
Well, let me throw another name at you, okay? This was probably way before your time, but Dick Vermeel took an extended break from coaching, and all he did was win a Super Bowl with the St. Louis Rams. So it isn't so bad to get away from the game. As long as you're around it, you don't lose track of the game. And you get, Dick Vermeel was probably the first one coach who actually cited the term burnout. So a lot of these coaches took some time away from it, and they were better because of it. So Dick Vermeel, we'll see how it all plays out. I hear that Stan Van Gundy's looking into the New Orleans Pelicans job. To me, if the Pistons had hired Stan Van Gundy only as a coach and not given him so much authority, do I think he would have done better in Detroit? Probably, but that was the only way they could get him there. And obviously, he set their franchise back quite a way. So he really did. Do I think Stan's a good coach? Probably, but you can't wear both hats, and he thought he could do it when you're controlling the checkbook as well as trying to deal with these guys on the floor, and he gave a guy like him way too much power. Do I think he rebounds in New Orleans if he gets hired? Possibly. I don't know. But we'll see.
That hire would actually make a lot of sense to me because throughout Stan Van Gundy's coaching career, he has a track record of being really good at developing young players into becoming better players into the league. And you look at all that young talent that they have in New Orleans with Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Jackson Hayes, Josh Hart, and the list goes on with the young players that they have in the organization. And he would be going in there with a couple of savvy veterans as well, should they stay on the team, like Derek Favors, J.J. Redick, Drew Holiday. So it's not an awful situation for him to end up being in. Now, is he a coach that could take them to the next level and turn them into a championship caliber team? That question remains to be seen for another day.
Yeah, but
Because
let me tell
that
you what
happened with
about,
the Orlando Magic. It happened mainly because Rashard Lewis had came over from Seattle, and Hito Turkoglu had came over from where he was with Sacramento, I believe it was, and Rafer Alston was one of those savvy veterans in the league who had been around and had been in Houston. Actually, was coached by Jeff Van Gundy, ironically. So
well, you tell me who Stan Van Gundy, okay, developed in Detroit. Go on. Now that you're bringing that up, who the heck did he develop? You tell me.
no, he didn't develop anyone in Detroit,
Exactly.
and a
Thank
lot of this has to do with what you brought up earlier. He couldn't necessarily focus on coaching as opposed to having front office control with things as well. And we've seen this fail on multitudes of occasions.
Right.
If you give someone more than one job, they don't really do well in performing in the main task, which is why they're there.
I mean, Chris Middleton was, I don't know who got rid of him. Was it Stan Van Gundy or Joe Dumars? How did that work out when he went?
I believe that was actually a Joe Dumars move.
Right, okay, but regardless, Stan Van Gundy wanted to trade everybody on the planet. Great. Thankfully, okay, they shipped him out of there. I don't know whether he was offered just an opportunity to stay on as coach or whether Tom Gores had seen enough, but regardless, if he's a coach, and the thing in New Orleans, he couldn't screw it up if he tried because David Griffin is the general manager. Everybody knows that David Griffin did a really good job turning the Cleveland Cavaliers into champions for sure. So, but to me, I don't know. Stan Van Gundy, could he be a productive NBA coach again? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not quite sold on him, but we'll see. The hire hasn't been made yet. A guy who I think will be a good coach at some point could be Sam Cassell because he has some good leadership qualities, but I don't want to get into every coaching move.
When it comes down to the New Orleans Pelicans coaching job, here's the one thing that I'm going to say that's going to be the most important. They're going to need a coach who's going to come in there and be a very strict dietitian and nutritionist as well, who's going to work with the training staff and with the team doctors and with the team cooks and nutritionists on these things as well. And I bring up this point because it's going to be very pivotal that they do everything possible to get Zion Williamson in correct NBA basketball shape. He's not in shape right now. And they're going to have to work hard with him. And maybe he's going to be one of those guys where you're going to need a coach who's going to have to push him to that point.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Even though the Lakers landed Anthony Davis, and I think it was a great move, I do feel that trade was a win-win for both sides. I really do. I mean, it's not like New Orleans didn't get a decent haul of prospects for him. I think Lonzo Ball has the potential to be a good player in this league. Now he won't have that pressure hanging over his head like he did with the Lakers. And what was it, Brandon Ingram? I think it was one of the.
Yes, and he's actually the reigning NBA Most Improved Player of the Year.
So it's not like you don't have a couple pieces that they could build around there if you are able to bring on some better talent around. I think that ultimately becomes a win-win for both teams, and I'm actually happy for Anthony Davis. He wanted to play in Los Angeles, but the thing is, it's not like New Orleans did not get a decent return. If a guy wants to play somewhere else, he doesn't want to be there, I get it. I have no problem with it. As long as the other team that's trading him gets a halfway decent return, that's called a win-win situation. So, Anthony Davis, to me, at the rate he's going, there's no question I could see Hall of Fame written the first ballot. The other ones that you were talking about, Rajon Rondo is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. He won't be. Okay. Dwight Howard, to me, I still don't believe he's a Hall of Fame player. I don't. I could be wrong, or maybe if he gets in it, it could be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years into it, depending on who his draft class is, then perhaps he gets in. But I will admit, though, to Dwight Howard's credit, I'm glad he did deserve a ring there. He was definitely he's a really good defensive player. He kept his mouth shut this time and blended with his team. And LeBron James proved that I can take some complex personalities and turn them around. So it kind of reminds me of what Detroit did when Mark Aguirre was damaged goods from the Dallas Mavericks. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and Isaiah Thomas said, we don't know what happened in Dallas, but we know what's going to happen here, or what isn't going to happen here. So you have certain guys in the locker room for which can do the police work, and along with a good coach. But I was glad that a lot of people on the Lakers were able to get their first rings. And you're forgetting about one other one. What about Contavious Caldwell-Pope?
Yes, he was definitely huge for that team with all of the big shots that he played, and even played some key defense down the stretch there as well, which is something you're not used to seeing from him. But those guys went all in, and they absolutely deserved to win that championship.
Yeah, another former Detroit Piston, Contavious Caldwell-Pope. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's other teams that players that have gone around the league from other franchises that go on to win rings elsewhere. You know, it goes when you're a championship team, you're always going to bring on veterans and so forth from other places where you have a chance to go ahead and win. So,
and speaking of bringing in veterans, that leads us to our next point, where many execs around the league, especially within the Eastern Conference, believe that LeBron James is going to try to force the Lakers front office to swing a deal to bring Chris Paul back to the City of Angels next season, but this time he will be donning the purple and gold as opposed to donning the red, white, and blue.
that wouldn't bother me at all. It wouldn't. And LeBron James, Jeannie Butts would sell him stock if he wanted to. She doesn't really, frankly, care. I wouldn't have a problem. I mean, David Stern's the one who nixed it in the first place. He didn't want any part of that. But you know what? David Stern reminds me of Bowie Kuhn in baseball. They were adamant against selling talent for something else if it benefited a higher echelon team. Bud Selig, when the economic times changed in baseball, of course, it didn't hurt that he was an owner of the Milwaukee Brewers for a while, understood that, you know what, I'll look the other way. I don't care. And Adam Silver reminds me a little bit of Bud Selig in a sense. You know, if you understand the comparison, but it all comes down to times changing.
No, I definitely understand the comparison. My only thing when it comes down to the Chris Paul trade is what exactly do the Lakers have to give up that Oklahoma City would be willing to take at this point? Because the Lakers gave up all of their really talented young players to acquire Anthony Davis last year.
Ever heard of expiring contracts?
Yes.
There you go. No, can't tell me that some of these better role players on the Lakers are going to be able to put together 2 or 3 in a row, especially when you can bring in a true natural point guard. You know, and the question is Rajon Rondo one of those people that you move over as well? I mean,
I believe you're going to have to make that deal happen, but also just due in part to the fact you don't know if Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul are going to be able to get along with each other. They have a storied history throughout their careers of honestly having a legitimate beef with each other. I remember game 2 of the Lakers 2018-2019 season, LeBron James' first home game as a member of the Lakers. Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul, at that time, Chris Paul was on the Houston Rockets. They got into a fight out there on the court. And it's not the first time that they've exchanged words or came to blows with each other either. So would they be able to set their differences aside? That's a question that remains. But if the Lakers had to make a choice, I'm pretty sure they would choose at this point to go with Chris Paul over Rajon Rondo.
Oh, no question about it. Are you kidding? I mean, let's face it, you don't know what you're going to get with Rajon Rondo, but you got a championship out of him. He's a heck of a point guard. He really is. He's a very unselfish player. In fact, that I don't know if I call him a Hall of Famer either, but I'll bet you right now that some of these guys don't care about the Hall of Fame as much as they care about winning a championship ring too. So,
no.
You know, I'll take the ring all day long. And if you get a second one, that's even bonus because that's something you have the rest of your life. The Hall of Fame is subject to people's opinion of what they think of you as what they do. I know. I mean, now, of course, in baseball, that doesn't work that way because the numbers do get you in no matter whether you win or have a popularity contest or not. That's another story. But, you know, we'll see. Again, where does Chris Paul wind up? I wouldn't, as long as Adam Silver is the commissioner, I could see him ending up in LA. But again, it depends on what the moving parts are. These guys, many of these guys had career years. Where do they fit in? A lot of people didn't think after they brought in Anthony Davis that between Davis and James, who you got to put, where your next 12, 13 spots going to? Well, you know, you get to piecemeal the numbers, do the salary cap analytics, and find ways to put enough quality players out there and hope that the coaching staff does what they've got to do.
Well, Chris Paul is not the only name of mention when it comes down to these great backcourt players in the league that the Lakers could have their eye on. Bradley Beal of the Washington Wizards, who, let's just be honest, he needs to get out of that organization. Whether he ends up on the Lakers or whether he ends up going elsewhere, Bradley Beal is another name of interest that the Lakers could acquire there. I wouldn't mind that either. I only question, do the Lakers have the pieces to make that happen? But no doubt about it, just like Chris Paul needs to get out of Oklahoma City because we know that they're going in a rebuilding type of situation, Bradley Beal needs to get out of the Washington Wizards organization.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I understand that. I mean, every league has player movement. I don't care who it is. But the question is, some of them have a hard salary cap, some have a soft cap, and some don't have any. It just depends on what you have. And you can have all the best players on the planet like the New York Yankees that didn't get them to the World Series. They got knocked out. So, but the Lakers have done what they had to do. And, you had Frank Vogel, a good coach. Jason Kidd, I imagine, played a bit of a role here, being a good point guard to make sure that the point guards are doing what they had to do. So I could see Kidd eventually getting a coaching job. I don't see it right away.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. So whatever the Lakers decide to do here, because we know that they're going to have to retool that roster, they're going to have to make some moves. Some of the guys on expiring contracts, they're not going to bring back. And also, I expect that Kyle Kuzma won't be back with the Lakers as well for his porous performance in the playoff bubble, but in particular in the NBA Finals. He just wasn't very good.
Yeah, but that's okay. Roster turnover is normal during the offseason, Xavier. It has been for years. I mean, you'd like to think you can bring back the same players as a magic potion, that they're going to have career years. It's not the case. The superstars are what they are. The core is what you have. You have a core. Like we have on our network, okay? I have a core of people that I want to keep on, and then you bring on other people, and if you don't think certain people that you brought on one time, you don't bring them back for some reason or another. You're always going to have core performers everywhere else that you can always trust to deliver. And, I don't care what business you're in, you're going to find that out as you get older. It's the way it goes. But, I think all in all, I don't know about you. I mean, I don't talk about the NBA as much, except when you would decide to want to do it, because I am tired of the drama. I really am. And I think the average fan is.
And speaking of drama, the Miami Heat could be on the way to creating more drama in the summer of 2021, where reports leaked out yesterday that the Miami Heat are preparing to go all in on bringing Giannis Antetokounmpo to South Beach. You can't fault the organization for wanting to bring a superstar player there to help them get better. But once again, I'm not in favor of players going to join teams that beat them in the postseason. I didn't like it when Kevin Durant went and joined the Golden State Warriors. And if Giannis were to go to the Miami Heat, I wouldn't like that either. I just don't believe in that whole if you can't beat them, join them concept. I don't understand what we're trying to teach here when we have players that do things like that.
Which is exactly why a lot of people, the interest in the NBA is waning, because let's not kid yourself. You don't have guys that are going to stay in one place for an extended period of time. There's way too much roster movement. Name me many players that in recent years that have started their career and finished it 1 year. I'd have a hard time coming up with a list on that.
No, you would. Because I'm not so sure that we have one of those guys in the league right now at this point. The last guy we had that even came close to that was Dwayne Wade. And even he had a 2-year period where he was not with the Miami Heat for his entire career. The last player who was a superstar in this league who spent his entire career with a franchise was the late, great Kobe Bryant. And I honestly believe he's going to be the last player, especially on that level in that league, to accomplish that. I don't believe it's going to happen anywhere else.
I personally think if Giannis were going to go anywhere and he really wanted to make an impact, I'd go to Toronto. And he's a worldwide figure is what I would do. And he has a really good coach in Nick Nurse and a great organization. He could build his brand in Canada as well as the United States. But I think the logical place is for him to stay and put with the Milwaukee Bucks, providing that they either have a coach that can go deep into the playoffs or providing that the front office does what they've got to do to get the necessary parts and don't let certain guys get away. Like, what was it, Malcolm Brogdon, I think, left?
Yes.
If he was a contributor. So I'd like to see Giannis stay in Milwaukee. He's happy there, but we'll see. I mean, there's way too much movement in the NBA compared to other sports. And I think that's another thing that the sport is lacking. To me, it really is the ability to have a star start, finish. And Kobe Bryant, you're right, is a great example. He stayed one place his entire career. Didn't hurt though that it was the Lakers either.
No, absolutely not.
So I don't know. Oh, I do want to, while we have the opportunity to do so, want to congratulate the Miami Marlins and manager Don Mattingly for winning National League Manager of the Year by the Sporting News. If there's any manager that deserves it more than Don Mattingly, you tell me and send me an email to that effect. Because Don Mattingly did one of the best managing jobs I've ever seen, and having worked with him this year, one of the most even-keeled, level-headed guys I've ever seen, and knows a lot about baseball. So,
and I'm really excited to see where he and Derek Jeter take this organization next.
Oh yeah, no, I'll tell you what. You talk about sustainable success. If he can win with that type of adversity, then only knows what can happen as they continue to build the core. Yeah, I mean, Derek Jeter, Don Mattingly, and ironically, both of those two guys played their entire career with one organization as well. Jeter did, and so did Don Mattingly. I don't care if you manage anywhere; nobody cares.
And you like to see people get rewarded who just do it the hard way. They do it the hard way. They do it the grinding and the old-fashioned way, building everything from the ground up. You know, I mean, it really makes you just look at how the Philadelphia Phillies believe that they're going to buy a championship team, and they can't even make the postseason. And this is with the MLB expanding to more playoff spots. The way I looked at it this year, Scott, and maybe I'll look at it even more this way next year, that, you know, barring anything else that happens with this pandemic and any other issues that we could have going into 2021, if we have a normal baseball season next year, something even close to it, the way I feel about it now is this: if you're not good enough to get one of those top 8 playoff spots in the conference, you're just not good, because it's not 4 teams anymore. It's not 3 teams. It's not 5 teams. It's 8 teams per conference now. So baseball is really trying to help out in the best way that they can for their own marketability, and to also bring more baseball to the networks, but also for the teams to have an opportunity to get there. Because if it's a normal year, do the Marlins make it? I don't know about that. Do the Toronto Blue Jays make it in the American League? I don't know about that either. But the fact of the matter is, things are what they are now. There are 8 teams in each conference that are now making it to the playoffs.
But you won't see 8 next year. You won't. I can tell you right now, if anything happens, I could see 7 at the most.
Well, either way, that's still an expansion from where we were with having 4 to 5.
I know. You might see 7 with one. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. 7 maybe with a playing game or a 2 out of 3 format is what I could see. I could see a 2 out of 3. Like what you saw with the NBA here. But, you know, one team in baseball isn't going to make any difference. And you have, 30 teams right now? And even then, when you compare baseball with any other sport, 162 games, you know who your teams that deserve to be in there. Unlike an 80-game year, 162, you find out what you're really built. This is when you find out how well your farm system is and your player development. The NBA doesn't, outside of the G League, what do they have as a feeder system? Although I know a lot of guys play overseas, hockey has a much more better feeder system than the NBA. And of course, the NFL, pro football needs one, and they don't have it. So we'll see. I don't know. But meanwhile, NBA talk here on The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan, Rock Motor City Madmouth, along with Xavier McKnight, the X-Man. We're going to do this twice a month, but we're graduating to once a week.
Yes, we are, and you all will be able to catch us next Thursday as we prepare to wrap up this edition of The Real and the Rare. Just want to take this time to say thank you to all of the NBA players, the coaches, and the front office executives, and anyone that had a hand, especially Commissioner Adam Silver as well, in putting that NBA bubble together. There wasn't a single positive COVID-19 test that came out of there, so that is a huge victory right then and there. But to have that entertainment on our TVs for over the past 3 months, no matter how you may feel about the league, it definitely helped take your mind off of some of the things that we have going on in our world right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I give Adam Silver a whole lot of credit with the bold move that he made by creating that bubble. Well, think about it. He began the bubble concept. The NHL went ahead with it. Neither bubble had any positive tests. And then MLB added a bubble concept to their playoffs. And for a season that I thought was never going to make it to the end, MLB went out there and they've done a really good job with it as well. There's nothing wrong with the bubble format. And I don't care what sport you're in. I don't believe an asterisk should ever be in order, because you wouldn't wish a pandemic on anybody. You really wouldn't. So for those of you that have asterisk, okay, in your head, I'd like to go ahead and engrave it on your skull, because I don't feel that that's appropriate. Give these athletes a lot of credit. The amount of pressure that they've been under, being away from their families, to make the sacrifices to continue to do what they do for a living, they deserve a lot of credit for doing what they do, and more power to them. And think about it, they're playing a lot of games in a row, in hockey with all the overtime things going on. Baseball, we got to remember the respective championship series, they're playing all these games in a row without a day off. And there is no such thing as that extra inning rule. Here we have a man on second base in the postseason. It goes back to normal. That was just a one-year experiment, which nobody cared about, but they had no choice but to do it. So more, you know what, Adam Silver, as much as I struggle stomaching the league these days, you did a heck of a job creating the bubble format. More power to you. And for that matter, equal treatment goes to Gary Bettman of the National Hockey League, and Rob Manfred has done a really good job with baseball, especially at one point we didn't know there was going to be any baseball with the public relations mess that was ensuing about getting them back on the field. But let me tell you, when they got back on the field, they acted like partners and they did what they had to do. So MLB saved itself from a PR disaster, and we have a pretty good postseason as well going on.
And we're waiting to see what's going to happen with the NFL, because they definitely do not have this COVID-19 situation under control. And you just wonder, there have been rumors about them wanting to go to a bubble format for the playoffs. Some of those might have been squashed. So we'll have to see if that's going to happen or not.
It'll never happen. I'll tell you why. What are you going to put 71 players on a team in a bubble? Good luck. The more people you have together, I think it works against them. Right now, the NFL is going through what everybody expected them to go through. Okay, you have a lot more players. There's no social distancing with the NFL. This isn't the NFL, National Flag Football League. Okay, these guys tackle each other. They get close to each other. That's going to happen. I think the NFL is doing a really decent job managing it the best they can. The college ranks, to me, it's a disaster that these kids are even out there playing in the first place.
Yeah, we're seeing some disastrous things take place right now in the SEC. They haven't had to shut things down entirely yet, but they're going to have to get a better handle on this. In particular, the University of Florida, they're not going to be playing LSU tomorrow. That game has been postponed to December. And also their game against the University of Missouri that was scheduled for next week, it's now scheduled for Halloween. And, you feel for the players, you feel for everyone who's involved in that situation, but also, it's just ironic to me that happened at the University of Florida, Scott, after Dan Mullen came out and said some of the most irresponsible and selfish comments after that game against Texas A&M on last Saturday, where he said, "We want the swamp field for our game against LSU. Our governor is allowing for universities and stadiums to not necessarily have restrictions on them anymore. So we'll see how the university obliges to that." That was a very irresponsible and selfish comment for Dan Mullen to say.
Yeah, but they've already shot it down. And I think Dan Mullen, if he had to take that statement back, probably realizes. But you know what? I understand where he's coming from. The swamp, you ever been in the swamp before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I had too. When Florida Atlantic played there, when Rusty Smith was there. The Gators definitely have a pretty good home field there, but unfortunately, at a time where you're lucky to get 20% people at the most. I mean, think about it. Even the New Orleans Saints are trying to go ahead and play at LSU to get some fans there, because New Orleans won't let them do it. So I can understand wanting to put a lot of people in there. And he's only reacting based on what the governor is saying, that you're allowed to have that many people. And so, like everybody else in the state of Florida, which is at times a little messed up to begin with, I understand it. I don't think it's appropriate. And now the outbreak that you see with the Gators, he knows it's unrealistic now. But again, we're talking about a situation which we don't have a vaccine for it yet. and there's lots of money being lost. And the thing is, if you can get a college season in here, then at least you're able to salvage something with TV money. So, sometimes your mind and your heart are thinking differently, but I completely understand it. I'm not going to crucify Dan Mullen on this platform. I understand where he's coming from, and I think if he could step it back, he would. But he's the best hire that university has made in a long time, roaming those sidelines, and he's doing a good job there. So.
And once again, we wish our best to those players and anyone who's been affected by COVID-19 there. I also want to take this time to send out my best wishes to Alabama head coach Nick Saban, who has contracted COVID-19 as well. No matter how you may feel about Nick Saban as a coach and some of the things he's done throughout his career, you don't wish this on anybody in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I'll tell you, the university I work with, Florida Atlantic University, has only played one game against Charlotte, and they won it. They've had 3 games canceled because of it. So they're all dealing with it as well. I mean, Nick Saban, I'll tell you what, right now, if I were a betting man, I think Vegas should get smart out there and put a betting line whether or not Nick Saban gets on the field tomorrow. After all, sports gambling is popular. Nick Saban will be on the field tomorrow. That's what I think.
Well, we'll definitely have to wait and see, because all reports that have come out throughout the course of the week said that he won't be there, but this is a big game for that program tomorrow against Georgia. And if they were to lose it, it would really hurt their college football playoff hopes.
He'll be there. That's just my gut feeling. If I'm wrong, it won't be the first time I'm wrong. It won't be the last time I'm wrong. I think he'll be there.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's just wrap up this edition of The Real and the Rare. Once again, we hope that everyone has enjoyed the content here tonight, and you've enjoyed the content that we've been bringing you throughout the NBA playoff bubble as well. And once again, thank you to the NBA and to Commissioner Adam Silver and to all the other commissioners as well who have been adopting this bubble playoff format. Clearly, we have something good that's working here, and we will see what happens in 2021, because it definitely feels and looks as if COVID-19 is still going to be a thing well into 2021.
My prediction for 2021 is they're probably going to go ahead and have multiple bubbles and regionalize it a little bit. That's what I think will happen. But I don't know for sure, but that would be the most sensible way to do it, rather than leave everybody in a particular place in an area. So I think you might see a regional bubble on the West Coast, then Pacific Northwest, or the Midwest, and then East. You probably have 4 or 5, 6 bubbles is what you'll have to house the necessary teams. What do they have? How many teams they got now? 30?
Yes.
So you'll probably, we'll see. I don't know. A lot of things will be determined then. So time will tell. So meanwhile, like Xavier said, this wraps up this edition of The Real and the Rare. We will be doing this every week. I don't know what our holiday schedule is going to be like, but going forward, we will be doing this broadcast every week. Going forward, we'll be doing sports topics as well as non-sports topics, anything that makes a whole lot of sense. So feel free to send us. We'll leave your contact information in a moment of ideas you want on here. We'll be more than happy to talk about them as well. So, all right, Xavier, go ahead and let everybody know. Give them all your information, and I'll do the same.
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The 2 I's at the end are capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. And you can send me a friend request and a follow request to LinkedIn and Facebook by typing in Xavier McKnight. And you can find tonight's edition of The Real and the Rare, as well as other episodes that we've done in the past, on my YouTube channel, Xavier McKnight.
Very good. And if you want to hear the audio version of this broadcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll repeat it again. Creature of Habit, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, as far as getting a hold of us here at the Tribune, you can follow us at Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. The South Florida Tribune has its own YouTube channel too, so you can either watch it on Xavier's, you can watch it on ours. Subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. I'll give you a reason why you should, or I'll give you 6 reasons why you should. You'll find the Sports Exchange is on that YouTube channel. No Limits, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, The Real and the Rare, which you're listening and watching here. fantasy football with myself, Ryan Schoolroot, and Xavier McKnight comes on that broadcast from time to time, and the South Florida Tribune podcast as well. I have a couple of guys that are actually working with me now on that. Ron Renzi, one of my attorneys here locally in Coral Springs, and another fellow by the name of Joe Littman, who will also be serving as co-host as we try to make sure that we bring this South Florida Tribune here to the South Florida community. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a section on there called Motor City Monitor, where Detroit is my hometown. I like to promote events back in my hometown as well, and teams, as well as we have our regular media distribution partners that provide us with content, our columnists, and also on the WSAN drop-down, you'll find our broadcaster there as well. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth, and I'll be more than happy to connect with you as well. So Xavier McKnight, very good broadcast tonight. Really enjoyed it, and we know we gave a lot of people a lot of information to digest. So if you guys decide to listen to this again, my advice to you is get a notepad and a pencil and paper. We make sure that you have a lot of good information. So you'll be able to find this broadcast under NBA wrap-up, because that's exactly what we pretty much have done tonight, is wrapped up the NBA, and we'll graduate to new things beginning next week. Any closing thoughts other than the COVID message you're going to deliver, Xavier McKnight?
Well, I would love to update everyone right now on the Game 6 of the American League Championship Series. The Tampa Bay Rays have completely unraveled at this point. The Houston Astros are leading 7-2 going into the top of the 8th inning. So we are on the verge of seeing our second series throughout sports history where a team went up 3-0 to begin the series, possibly allow the other team to come back and win 4 straight games to win the series. That other series I'm talking about, of course, the infamous 2004 ALCS with the Red Sox and the Yankees, where the Red Sox went on to win their first World Series in 86 years, I believe it was, to end the curse of the Bambino. So the Houston Astros, they're currently on top. The Tampa Bay Rays have some work to do, but if the Astros hold on for this win here tonight, I don't like the Rays' chances in Game 7.
Well, thanks for the update. We could very well be talking baseball on next week's Real and the Rare. I had a World Series edition of the Sports Exchange on Wednesday night with former St. Louis Cardinals pitcher and Kansas City Royals pitcher Mark Littell, one of the best guests that we have on the network. He, along with Stuart Hack, and I did a broadcast on Wednesday. Would encourage you guys to listen to that as well and watch it as well. So, you know, I have a feeling we'll be talking baseball next week, Xavier. It's only timely that we come up with some good baseball stuff, and we're due to have one of those. So there you go, folks. That'll kind of tip you a little in the direction that we're going to talk about during the World Series edition of the Real and the Rare. All right, Xavier, deliver your COVID message, and we'll wrap her up.
Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the numbers are now starting back to rise here, and things are really becoming very concerning here once again. Not that they weren't concerning, but they are concerning at a high rate once again. The U.S. now has had over 8 million COVID-19 cases since the start of this pandemic. That is a very big deal. We are also now heading towards cold and flu season, and the fears of a twindemic are very real. So we need to continue to do everything possible to remain vigilant, to remain safe, and to be responsible. Please put on your mask, wear your gloves, don't gather in large crowds, social distance, and encourage everyone around you to do those same things as well. That is the only way we're going to continue to get through this. Things are really looking scary right now, but we can help fight this thing off, but we have to do the right thing.
Well, you heard it from my co-host, Xavier McKnight. Listen to the guy. He knows what he's talking about. COVID-19 hit Nick Saban, and even the President of the United States, Donald Trump, got hit with it. COVID-19 doesn't care who you are, how big you are, how little you are. You know, if you don't play it safe, everybody's in trouble. Can't get two bigger examples than Nick Saban and the President of the United States, Donald Trump. So, meanwhile, on behalf of Xavier McKnight, this is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, thanking you for joining us on this edition of The Real and the Rare. We will be back next week with another edition. So, good night, Xavier McKnight. Job well done.
All right. Good night, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode.